Today's video is going to be a quick and easy tutorial on how to add a digital odometer to your Assetto Corsa mod. You will need Blender or 3ds Max and the knowledge of how to export and import your car as a KN5 file. I will not be covering that in this tutorial. Alright, let's jump right into it. First thing you'll need to do is open your car in Blender or your 3ds Max. And once your car is opened, let's go ahead and add our dummies. First thing is we got to figure out where we want it to be. I'm going to hide this glass real quick. And we see I have my odometer here. I'm going to make this super easy for me. One thing to do is you can do Shift, Control, Alt, and C to open up this little menu. And you can say origin to center of mass when you have that. So that will put your origin in the center of the object that you're working on. Then when you have that, you can do Shift S and you can go cursor to selected. Once your 3D cursor is in the location of the center of your object there, we can go ahead and add our dummy or empty. I prefer to call them empties because that's what they're labeled as in Blender, but I believe 3ds Max uses dummies. But let's go ahead and do Shift A to open up our add menu. Down here under the empty object, the empty options, we can go to plane axes. Alright, with that we now have our new axes entered in or loaded in. One thing that makes it a little bit easier to do all this, because there's a certain specific thing you need for Assetto Corsa. If we go over here to our object properties in this orange square, we can go down to viewport display and click on axis. That way it shows us which axis is where our axis directions are. So we see this Z here. For Assetto Corsa, this Z needs to be forward. So we can rotate that R, and then we can strain it on the X axis by pressing X. So R, press X, and then we'll do just 90 degrees. And so now we got Z forward. But we want to make this a little bit easier, so I'm gonna hold, so since I have the axis highlighted here, I'm going to hold Shift and click on our odometer. I'm going to hit the / key to go into an isolated view here. And I'm also going to hit the 3 key just so I can make this easier to line up. I'm going to reselect our axis here. And we see the line of the plane here. I'm just going to match that. Again, press R and then constrain on the X axis by pressing X. Just line that up so they're about even. It does not have to be perfect, and there's other ways to do this, but this doesn't need to be anything crazy fancy. I'm just going to do it that way quickly. Alright, and so it's pretty much lined up, and then I'm going to move this as well, move it forward a little bit. So I'm going to press G to move it, and then I'm going to press Z twice to constrain it along the local Z axis, and boom, nice and easy. Just give yourselves a little bit of a gap there. It's not 100% necessary, but I like to do that. I'm going to press the / key again, so that way we can go back to all our other objects. And you see our plane axis is right there. And then one thing we'll have to do is we'll have to go over here and name the empty. And then for the name, if we follow what the Kunos RX-7 uses on their empty, we're just going to call it data or display underscore data, and that will be the name of our empty. If you're also doing a clock at the same time, you can also just call it _1. Doesn't really matter. I don't even think it matters what you call it, but this is what they use in the Kunos RX-7, so we're just going to follow along with that. So display data. And now with the empty in place and all set up and aligned how we need it, I'm going to go ahead and unhide our gauge glass that we originally hidden, and we're going to re-export the car. So we'll select everything with the A key to select everything in the scene that's active, and we'll go File, Export, FBX. And you see I've been working on this car a lot, so I have really everything already. I'm just going to select that just to make sure it's named the same thing I want it to be named. We're going to limit our thing to selected objects just because there's certain other objects in the scene that I don't want, and just want what I selected. And then for Blender, it's important that you set this apply scalings under transform to FBX all, so we can leave that as 1.0. If you leave it as all local, you have to change this to 0.01. So let's just leave it as FBX all, so you don't got to really change anything. So just again, make sure your apply scalings is at FBX all, and we'll hit export. Now that we have the dummy or empty all set up for the car, we next need to hop into our text editor. I like to use Notepad++ and set up our digital instruments INI. On the left hand side, I have the one that I'll be using for the truck, and on the right hand side I have the Kunos RX-7 opened up here so we can see what's going on with it and see what they're doing. Right here, this item 0, this is what we'll be copying in. So I'm just going to copy and paste that over. You see here this parent, this is the dummy that we were using. And since we use what they use, since we have it named the same as what the Kunos does, display data, we don't have to change anything. But depending on what you named yours, just make sure your dummy name and the name for parent are the same. We can leave all this together. This text is what it's going to display. You can put whatever you want there. The custom shaders patch extension config will overwrite it. But it's nice to have something there so you can see where your text is going. And then this font here, you can put whatever you want there. If you open up your content manager and you go into miscellaneous, up here we have fonts. So here's all the fonts that I have installed. The ones with the cat are the Kunos ones, and it's good to have or use those if you can. Otherwise you will have to package up the font with the car when you send it to your friends. So I'm just going to go with this digital big. It looks fine enough for me. We're going to go back here to our Notepad++. That's already what it's at. So I'm going to leave that. Align right. This is going to tell you where it's going to start its text from. Right, middle, or I'm assuming right, middle, and left. Align right is what I'm going to want to use for my truck. And then this position, this is where it will place the text in reference to the dummy. So this first set of numbers here is your left to right. The second set of numbers here is your up and down. And this third set of numbers here will be your in and out. You don't really have to worry about that too much. It will go pretty much right where you put your dummy. So when I set up the dummy, I left a little space between the dummy and the odometer. I don't have to worry about adding a little bit of padding there. So I'm going to leave that as 0. And the annoying part is here is that you have to adjust these, and they only load when you load the car up. So you can't adjust it while you're in game. So you have to load up the game, take a look at your odometer, make sure the thing's not, if it's not in the right position that you want, you'll have to adjust your numbers here, and then you'll have to load the game back up in order to see the change. It's a little bit annoying, a little bit tedious, but once you get it in the right general position, you'll know how much you need to move. A small movement is all you really need, especially when you're talking about odometers, because this entire size is meters. So we're talking a very small movement, because 1 would be a large, 3 foot or a 1 meter movement in whatever direction you're going. So again, keep it nice and small. I suggest doing no more than 0.005 at a time, maybe 0.01, depending on what you need. Now that we have the INI configured, we need to load up the game and check our positioning. And we see the 1 there of the number I was using. If we pull back so you can see there, I have my setup here. I did a couple extra things while I was in here, but I have my setup. So my text is just 1. Again, you might want to put a couple more things, but then this is my position. So again, remember your position is left to right, up and down, in and out. And then your size also dictates. I did change my font as well, but now that that's all set up in there where I want it, I can go ahead and add our extension config lines. So I'm going to put those right here. This first one is going to be odometer main. That is the code for the odometer. It's calling our digital item 0 here. That would be this one right here. And this is a format. So if we change that, I'll show you what that does in a second. Because Kunos or Assetto Corsa works with kilometers, I want miles. So I have to use this output multiplier to get miles. You'll see here it's currently holding the 1. And if I Control S to save that, looks like in order to change anything going on with the odometer, you also have to close and open it again. So I'm just trying a couple different things. This format here, I'm not sure if you noticed, with the 0 in front of the 6 there, it put the zeros as well. I don't really care about those. If you want the zeros in front, you can go ahead and put the 0 there, save and reload. I don't care about that. I want it to be like that, how it is currently without the leading zeros. So if you want to put multiple dummies in to do different things with the digital instruments, you can add separate dummies. Again, it doesn't seem to matter what they're called as long as your parent name matches with the dummy that you're trying to interact with. That's it for the tutorial. It ended up being a bit longer than I was planning on. However, I'm going to leave in the positioning and aligning of the dummy part that I was originally planning on skipping over. All in all, it's an easy task that every mod should have done. When I wanted to set one up for myself, however, I had to do quite a bit of digging to find out how to do it, and I saw that there wasn't any easily searchable tutorials on how it's done. So I decided to make my own. Thanks for watching. I hope it helped.